Have you ever been in that situation at work where you knew you had to have a tough conversation?
Oh, definitely.
Maybe give some critical feedback or tell a client about an unexpected delay. And that moment right before you speak feels like the hardest part. You're just not sure how to, well, kick things off.
Absolutely. It's that initial approach. It really sets the stage. A clumsy start can make a difficult situation even, well, more difficult.
That's exactly what we're diving into today. We're going to explore some really effective English expressions that can help you navigate those tricky professional conversations, help you sound a bit more confident, maybe.
Yeah, give you that sense of ease. And it's fascinating, isn't it? How just a few carefully chosen words right at the beginning can shift the entire dynamic.
Precisely. So, our mission today, if you like, is to equip you with 6 key English phrases. They should help you initiate those challenging discussions more comfortably.
And maybe understand a bit about the sort of cultural context, too, those communication styles in English-speaking workplaces.
Exactly. Okay, let's look at our first one. I wanted to touch base with you about.
Ah, yes. This is a real go-to phrase for many people. I
Yeah.
wanted to touch base with you about, it's basically a way of saying, I wanted to briefly talk to you about.
Or I wanted to connect with you regarding something specific.
Right, and the interesting thing is the origin it borrows from baseball, touching base, is like a quick check-in, a safe return.
A brief connection, yeah. So you might start with something like, I wanted to touch base with you about the latest marketing campaign results.
It's quite gentle, isn't it? A softer way to introduce a topic that might actually need a deeper dive later on.
Yeah. And for a memory tip, maybe imagine lightly tapping a baseball-based, soft, easy start. So that's I wanted to touch base with you about.
The real advantage here, I think, is its informality. It doesn't immediately scream serious problem or confrontation,
Mm,
which can help the other person feel, well, less defensive right away.
good point. Okay, our second key phrase is, I'd like to address something that's been on my mind. This one feels a bit more direct, though, doesn't it?
It is. It's definitely more direct. I'd like to address something that's been on my mind. It clearly signals your intention to openly discuss an issue you've been thinking about.
And that word address, it means to focus on or deal with something specific, right? Shows you're ready to tackle it head on.
Exactly. The example was, I'd like to address something that's been on my mind concerning the recent project feedback. It's quite clear.
Right. For this one, maybe picture yourself like taking a thought out of your head and placing it openly on the table, ready for discussion. I'd like to address something that's been on my mind.
Yeah, I like that visual. It really indicates you have a specific concern you want to bring up for a proper conversation. It encourages, openness and directness.
Okay, number 3. This one sounds very polite. I appreciate you taking the time to discuss this sensitive matter.
It is, very much so. I appreciate you taking the time to discuss this sensitive matter. It's a way to acknowledge the other person's time right up front.
And it recognizes the topic might be tricky or sensitive.
Exactly. By showing that gratitude first, you're aiming to create a more respectful, more understanding atmosphere for the chat.
The example is, I appreciate you taking the time to discuss this sensitive matter regarding the recent team restructuring. Ooh, yeah, definitely sensitive.
Hmm.
The memory tip is maybe visualizing, placing your hand over your heart, a gesture of gratitude. So, I appreciate you taking the time to discuss this sensitive matter.
This phrase is particularly useful when you kind of anticipate the topic will be uncomfortable, or maybe it needs extra effort or emotional energy from the other person. It really softens that initial approach by showing consideration.
Makes sense. Moving on, I think we need to have an open conversation about, this one really emphasizes honesty, doesn't it?
It does, precisely.
Right.
I think we need to have an open conversation about it. Clearly states that a frank, honest discussion is needed for a specific issue.
That word open, it really highlights transparency and the need for everyone involved to share freely.
Mhm. The example sentence given is, I think we need to have an open conversation about the challenges we're seeing with the new software implementation.
Yeah, very clear. For this one, maybe imagine opening a window wide, letting in fresh air, complete honesty. I think we need to have an open conversation about.
I like that. This phrase is super effective for setting the expectation that, okay, this discussion needs to be candid. Everyone should feel okay sharing their thoughts, their opinions, without holding back.
Okay, number 5 is, I'd value your perspective on a challenge I'm facing. This one feels like it's actively inviting collaboration.
It absolutely does. I'd value your perspective on a challenge I'm facing. It frames a potentially difficult conversation, not as criticism, but as seeking input. seeking their expertise.
Using the word value really communicates respect for their opinion, doesn't it? It shows you see them as a partner in finding a solution.
Exactly. The example. I'd value your perspective on a challenge I'm facing with the evolving client needs.
Okay, and the memory tip here. Imagine holding something precious, like a gem, in your hands. It symbolizes the value you place on their viewpoint. I'd value your perspective on a challenge I'm facing.
This approach can be incredibly effective in just lowering the tension. Because it positions the whole thing as like collaborative problem solving, not a confrontation or just you telling them what's wrong.
Yeah, much more positive. And finally, our sixth key expression, I'd like to clear the air regarding. This one suggests there might already be some tension, right? Or a misunderstanding.
That's exactly right. I'd like to clear the air regarding. It basically means you want to address and resolve any confusion or maybe negative feelings around a particular situation.
The idiom itself, clear the air, means removing that tension, restoring harmony.
Yeah, the example given was, I'd like to clear the air regarding some of the comments that were made during yesterday's team meeting.
Okay. So the memory tip. Imagine opening a window again, but this time letting out stale, uncomfortable air, making space for fresh understanding. I'd like to clear the air regarding.
This phrase is super useful when you just sense there's been a misunderstanding, or maybe unspoken issues are starting to affect the team dynamic or a working relationship. Addressing it directly like this can actually prevent things from escalating and helps build trust.
Okay, so we've explored these 6 really useful expressions. Now, maybe let's touch briefly on how approaching these kinds of conversations might, differ depending on the cultural context.
Yeah, that's important. We can think about general tendencies, maybe compare some common approaches with what's often typical in English-speaking professional environments.
Right, because communication styles aren't universal.
Exactly. So in some cultural settings, there might be a much greater emphasis on avoiding direct conflict.
Yeah.
Communication might rely more heavily on nonverbal cues, reading between the lines, understanding the implied meaning. Maintaining harmony is often paramount.
So difficult messages might be delivered indirectly, maybe through someone else or saved for a more informal setting to avoid anyone losing face.
Precisely. Which is quite different from what you often find in many English-speaking professional settings.
That's so. What's the contrast there?
Well, in many English-speaking cultures, there's often a preference for addressing issues more directly. But, and this is key, always with an emphasis on politeness and tact.
Okay, so direct but careful.
Right. You'll often hear about the importance of using I statements, I feel, I noticed, to express your own perspective without sounding accusatory.
That makes sense. Taking ownership of your viewpoint.
Exactly. And things like regular scheduled one-on-one meetings for feedback are also quite common. The whole approach tends to be very focused on identifying the problem clearly and then working together to find a solution. Problem solving is big.
So in those kinds of environments, actually initiating a difficult conversation directly, maybe using some of the phrases we've talked about, can be seen as a sign of professionalism, even leadership.
Absolutely. It shows you're willing to tackle issues openly and constructively. But again, while that directness is often valued, you have to be diplomatic.
And that's where these opening phrases come in handy.
Exactly. They help soften that directness. They make it more palatable, less likely to make someone immediately defensive. And that ultimately leads to a much more productive conversation.
That makes perfect sense. Oh, and there was that really useful tip about timing too, wasn't there?
Yes. Giving someone a heads up, just letting them know you'd like to have a more substantial conversation can make a huge difference in how receptive they are.
Right, like a simple, hey, do you have some time later today to talk about something important? It prepares them mentally.
Precisely. It shows respect for their time, gives them a moment to brace themselves maybe, which usually leads to a much more thoughtful and productive exchange when you actually sit down to talk.
Okay, great tip. So just to quickly recap those 6 phrases for everyone listening, we had, I wanted to touch base with you about.
Yep, for that gentle start. And I'd like to address something that's been on my mind for when you need to be a bit more direct.
We also covered, I appreciate you taking the time to discuss this sensitive matter, showing that consideration.
Along with, I think we need to have an open conversation about, which really emphasizes transparency.
Then there was, I'd value your perspective on a challenge I'm facing. That collaborative problem-solving approach.
And finally, I'd like to clear the air regarding for tackling those existing misunderstandings or tensions head on.
So there you have it, 6 really key English expressions. Hopefully they'll help you start those challenging professional conversations on a much better footing.
Yeah, mastering these opening lines can truly make navigating those difficult discussions feel, well, a little less daunting and definitely a lot more effective.
Absolutely. And speaking of communicating effectively, in our next deep dive, we're actually going to move beyond just saying, I think.
Ooh, interesting. What's the plan?
We'll be exploring really powerful ways to express your opinions with more confidence, more persuasiveness, looking at phrases to help you articulate your ideas clearly and strongly.
Okay. So building on this foundation, that sounds like another really insightful exploration into the art of professional communication, adding more tools to the toolkit.
Exactly. We're really looking forward to sharing that with you next time.
Difficult conversations made easier with the right expressions.